The little girl stood in the center of the grand marble mansion, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and priceless paintings, while the richest men in the city smiled and told her she could have anything she wanted. Everyone expected her to ask for a mountain of toys, a huge bedroom, or enough money to change her life forever. Instead, she quietly folded her tiny hands, looked into the billionaire's eyes, and made a single wish that shattered every wall around his heart. In that unforgettable moment, the room fell silent, the servants stopped breathing, and the man who had built an empire suddenly found himself unable to speak. Before we continue this emotional story, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories that remind us humanity still exists. In the quiet suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, lived a wealthy businessman named Jonathan Carter. At 61 years old, Jonathan owned one of the country's largest construction companies. Newspapers praised his success, magazines celebrated his fortune, and television interviews admired his business genius. Yet none of those stories mentioned the truth waiting behind the gates of his enormous estate. His mansion echoed with silence every evening. His wife had passed away years earlier, his only son had cut off contact after a painful family disagreement, and despite having hundreds of employees, Jonathan often ate dinner alone at a table built for 12 people. Money had surrounded him with luxury but had quietly stolen away the simple warmth of family. Working inside that mansion every day was a kind-hearted maid named Grace Mitchell. Grace had spent nearly 8 years cleaning the enormous house, preparing rooms for guests who rarely stayed, polishing furniture that almost nobody touched, and quietly disappearing before the wealthy visitors noticed her presence. She never complained despite raising her 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, alone after losing her husband in a tragic workplace accident several years earlier. Every dollar Grace earned went toward rent, groceries, school supplies, and making sure Sarah never felt the full weight of poverty. Sarah was unlike most children her age. She never measured happiness by expensive possessions because she had learned from her mother that love was worth more than anything money could buy. Every afternoon after school, she patiently waited in a small reading corner inside the mansion while Grace finished her work. Instead of wandering through luxurious rooms, Sarah spent her time reading library books, drawing colorful pictures, and occasionally helping elderly gardeners water flowers. Even the security guards admired the gentle smile that never seemed to leave her face. One rainy afternoon, Jonathan unexpectedly returned home early after canceling an important business meeting. As he walked through the hallway, he noticed Sarah sitting beside one of the large windows, carefully repairing an old children's book with clear tape instead of throwing it away. Curious, he asked why she didn't simply ask her mother to buy another copy. Sarah smiled softly and explained that stories deserved second chances just like people did. Something about that simple answer stayed in Jonathan's mind long after he walked away. Over the following weeks, Jonathan began noticing things he had ignored for years. He watched Grace working late without complaint. He saw Sarah thanking every employee who spoke to her. He noticed how mother and daughter laughed together while eating homemade sandwiches outside beneath a large oak tree instead of feeling embarrassed about their simple meal. They possessed something he had lost decades earlier. They carried peace. As Christmas approached, Jonathan decided to organize a celebration for every employee working at his estate. The ballroom was decorated with glowing lights, fresh pine wreaths, and elegant tables covered with delicious food. Every worker received generous holiday bonuses and thoughtful gifts. Near the end of the evening, Jonathan called little Sarah to the front of the room. Smiling warmly, he announced that because she had brought unexpected joy into a lonely house, he wanted to give her 3 wishes. He promised to fulfill anything within his power. The guests applauded, expecting laughter and childish excitement. Some whispered that Sarah would probably ask for a new bicycle, expensive dolls, or perhaps enough money for college. Grace herself looked nervous, hoping her daughter wouldn't ask for something impossible. Sarah took a deep breath. She looked around the magnificent room before quietly raising her eyes toward Jonathan. Her first wish was not for herself. She wished that Jonathan's son would forgive him and come home before it became too late. The applause disappeared instantly. Jonathan froze. No business negotiation had ever left him speechless. No competitor had ever broken his confidence. Yet one innocent sentence from a little girl reached a place buried beneath years of pride and regret. Tears gathered in his eyes as memories flooded back. He remembered the terrible argument that had separated him from his son, Michael, almost 15 years earlier. Jonathan had chosen business over family again and again until Michael finally walked away, believing his father loved success more than people. Jonathan slowly asked Sarah why she would waste her first wish on someone else's family. She simply answered that lonely people deserved another chance because no amount of money could hug someone at night. Even the toughest employees quietly wiped tears from their faces. That evening Jonathan locked himself inside his study and opened an old wooden box containing photographs he had not touched in years. Pictures of fishing trips, birthday parties, family vacations, and happier times reminded him how much life had changed. For the first time in years, he admitted to himself that his greatest failure had never been financial. It had been personal. The next morning Jonathan searched through old records until he found Michael's address in Colorado. Instead of sending lawyers or assistants, he boarded a plane alone carrying nothing but a handwritten letter apologizing for every birthday missed, every broken promise, and every moment he had allowed ambition to replace fatherhood. Michael was shocked to see his father standing outside his modest home. The conversation lasted hours. Old pain surfaced, difficult memories returned, and forgiveness did not come easily. Yet Jonathan never defended himself. He simply admitted he had been wrong. By sunset, father and son embraced for the first time in 15 years. Weeks later, Jonathan returned to Boston with Michael, his daughter-in-law Rebecca, and 2 grandchildren he had never met. The silent mansion suddenly echoed with laughter instead of loneliness. Grace watched from the kitchen as children ran through hallways that had once felt like empty museums. Sarah smiled quietly because her first wish had come true. Jonathan reminded Sarah she still had 2 wishes remaining. Everyone assumed she would finally choose something for herself. Instead, Sarah asked for a community library where children from struggling families could borrow books, study safely after school, and dream beyond their circumstances. Jonathan immediately donated an old office building, hired architects, and transformed it into one of the most welcoming children's libraries in the city. Thousands of books filled colorful shelves, volunteer teachers offered free tutoring, and hundreds of children discovered opportunities they never imagined possible. Months passed, and reporters praised Jonathan's generosity. Many believed the billionaire had suddenly become charitable for publicity. Only Grace, Sarah, and his reunited family knew the truth. His heart had changed long before the newspapers noticed. Finally came Sarah's third and final wish. Jonathan expected another request benefiting strangers. He was right. Sarah quietly wished that her mother would never have to work until her hands hurt again. Jonathan looked toward Grace, whose fingers had grown rough after years of endless cleaning. Without hesitation, he promoted Grace to oversee employee welfare across all of his properties, giving her a comfortable salary, excellent benefits, flexible hours, and the respect she had always deserved. He also established a scholarship in Sarah's father's memory for children who had lost parents while their families were working hard to build better lives. Grace cried openly, overwhelmed not by wealth but by dignity. Jonathan realized that true generosity wasn't measured by the size of a gift. It was measured by how deeply it restored hope. Years later, the Carter Children's Learning Center became one of the most respected community projects in Massachusetts. Sarah grew into a compassionate teacher who inspired young students to believe kindness could transform lives. Michael helped expand his father's charitable foundation, while Jonathan spent more time reading bedtime stories to his grandchildren than attending business meetings. The billionaire who once believed success was counted in dollars eventually discovered that life's greatest fortune was found in forgiveness, family, and compassion. One little girl's selfless heart had accomplished what wealth never could. Her wishes had not changed only one man's future, they had transformed generations. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to the channel, and help us spread more stories that remind the world kindness is never wasted. Before we end, please leave a comment with this simple message: kindness changes lives. We'd love to know you're part of this amazing community. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not the wishes we make for ourselves but the ones we make for someone else. Money can build magnificent houses, but only love can turn them into homes. Forgiveness may take years to arrive, yet a single act of compassion can begin the journey in an instant. And somewhere, perhaps closer than we realize, one small act of selfless kindness is waiting to change a life forever.